Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Unstuck movement. This platform was created to help you find breakthrough in your life. So I bring incredible guests on here who have true testimonies of breakthrough. Today we have the powerful and the wonderful Matt Kutz with us on the platform. And today we're, talking about resiliency, adversity, identity, the epic mindset, contextual intelligence, embracing the unknown. And the thing I'm fascinated about is the 3D thinking. And so, Matt, right off the bat, I want to know what is 3D thinking? How do you apply it to your life and your leadership?
Well, thanks, Rob. First of all, 3D thinking is the integration of the three dimensions of time into how we process information, evaluate opportunities. The three dimensions of time are past, present, and future. How we teach that in the 3D thinking model, and which is a part of the contextual intelligence framework, is hindsight, insight, and foresight. What we need to do is we need to understand that all three dimensions of time need to be represented in our thinking process as we evaluate what's in front of us. Most people, statistically speaking, are going to gravitate towards or lean towards or overemphasize hindsight. What happened last time? How did this work last time? Last time I tried this, I got burnt, things like that. Or last time I did this, it went fantastic. So let's do it again. And that's great. And I would never say don't use hindsight, but what's lacking in that are the other two dimensions of time. So hindsight is important, but then you also have to look at insight. Insight is what's going on in the real moment right now in present time. You have to be aware of that because that has an incredible impact on how things are going to play out, right? And if we only think about hindsight and miss, well, the world is completely different now, you're going to make the mistake of thinking that what worked last time will also work this time. So you have to include insight in that, and then you have to have foresight. Foresight is the ability to articulate and identify what I call your aspirational identity. What is it you want to be? Who is it you want to become? Your future self, so to speak. If you can't articulate that, then you're not going to be able to evaluate correctly if the opportunity in front of you is the best thing to do right now based on who you were, what's going on, and who you want to be. So we have to integrate all three aspects of time. The best way that I know to teach that, and it was funny because I thought it was a completely original idea. And here several years ago, I'm watching Christmas time and I'm watching the Christmas Carol, Ebenezer Scrooge, right?
That's what popped in my head. Yeah, man, that's good.
And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I had Charles Dickens, I guess, thought about this hundreds of years ago. But Ebenezer Scrooge had visits from three Christmas ghosts, the ghosts of Christmas past, Christmas present, and Christmas yet to come. And so I introduced that in my lectures and in my workshops and think you need to have a visit from a Christmas ghost. So I actually have a worksheet and all these kinds of things that helps you determine which Christmas ghost that you need a visit from most urgently. and we go through that. And that's really how we help coach people and get people thinking about how to integrate that 3D thinking framework into their life.
I love that. And it makes me think too, in life, it's so beneficial. Therapy is very beneficial, counseling, but coaching also super beneficial. And those work in tandem really well together. I just know in my own personal life, I benefited so much from therapy to get through some stuff that happened in the past, but it didn't help me to think forward into the future of who I wanted to be, right? This vision of who I was becoming. Right. And those things together work so well. And that made me, when you were talking about that too, I thought about that in the 3D thinking mentality. Like if we just focus on the past, we really can't picture who we're going to be in the future and move towards that person. So there's healing in the therapy and counseling, but there's growth and there's that dreaming become a reality whenever you're looking foresight into the future. Do you agree with that? Or how do you?
I agree 100%. And one of the things that I caution people against is to differentiate between foresight and fantasy. And I think a lot of people mistake foresight for fantasy. And so in other words, so for example, we could say, all right, hey, Rob, what is it that you want to do, 5 years from now, 6 months from now, whatever it is, however we're working together and you say, hey, well, listen, I've always wanted to, finish my book, or I've always wanted to get out of debt, or I've always wanted to have a great partner in a relationship or whatever. And then you say, and you follow it up with this, it's usually internal dialogue, and you tell yourself, boy, I sure like to be out of debt, but I can't because. I sure would like to finish my education, but I can't because. And I always caution people to say, if you have an I can't because clause in your future identity of how you're thinking about yourself, then you're operating in fantasy and not in foresight.
Mm.
Have to work to transition you away from fantasy to foresight. So how we do that is we really coach people and instruct people. You have to be able to literally articulate what it is you want to be or become, and then how you're going to do it. Because the I can't because clause is basically an excuse not to try. It's basically an excuse not to even plan. And they live in this space of, wouldn't it be nice if, and someday I hope this happens to me, but then they just wait for lightning to strike and they don't really actively move toward that future self. If we can get people to actually articulate it, and I mean that very literally, you have to say it out loud so that another person can hear it and see it too. If you're able to convince another person that you can do what it is you say you're going to do and get them to see what you see, then you are operating in foresight and not fantasy. And that sometimes happens quickly and sometimes not so quickly. And we just go through that process with them. But it's really important to see that, to operate in foresight to get that. And then, of course, foresight is always informed by hindsight and insight.
Yeah, I love that. It's so true. One of the things I found that my some part of my family has been blessed with and cursed with is delusional optimism. So
Right.
it's a good thing to be optimistic, but you have to be realistic about it, not just like, oh, someday it's going to happen. I don't know how, but it's going to fall into place. Like that's a
Right.
great way to think until nothing happens, and then you keep thinking that way, and still nothing happens. So it's definitely the key ingredient, the piece of the puzzle, the vision. Like there's got to be steps in place. There's got to be a plan. There's got to be goals on your way to getting there. All right. So before we go any further, already loving this conversation. So already enjoying this so much. And I want to welcome everybody to this platform. We created this platform because I've been stuck at many places in my life. I'm sure everybody who's watching and listening has been stuck. Matt, I know you've been stuck.
Yep.
And we're going to continue to have spots where we get stuck or reach a plateau, whatever you want to call that, and we need breakthrough. So I love bringing people on here who are incredible examples of breakthrough. We're sponsored by the Connected Leaders Academy. You can check out connectedleadersacademy.com. Over 500 heart-centered servant leader entrepreneurs from all over the world helping one another grow. And also the Pro Podcaster Academy. If you're somebody who doesn't have a podcast, but you really want to have one, you've been thinking about it for a while, you want a platform that'll create a great impact, will help your business grow, will help you grow personally and professionally, and also will bring incredible connections into your life. I urge you to launch your own platform. And if you have a platform already, how do you streamline it? How do you monetize it and make it the core, the nucleus of what you're doing? I'd love to assist you in that journey. You can join the Pro Podcaster Academy at robzwentz.com. Matt Kutz with us today is an award-winning author, professor, and global leadership expert who helps individuals and organizations grow through uncertainty using contextual intelligence and 3D thinking after being diagnosed with advanced metastatic. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, metastatic.
Metastatic. Wow. Okay. I got it right. Metastatic prostate cancer. He now empowers others with a message of hope, resilience, and purpose. And so I would love to go into your stuck story here, Matt, as we start things off. Going through that prostate cancer, I'm sure that you felt stuck for a while in that place. Can you speak to that part of your journey where you found incredible breakthrough and what happened?
Yeah, so it's actually a journey I'm still fighting and still in it. And it's so in November of 23, I was diagnosed with advanced metastatic prostate cancer, and the advanced metastatic part of that just means it spread. So they found after, because initially my diagnosis, and any of your listeners who are familiar with prostate cancer know that the medical community generally considers prostate cancer the easy cancer, right? It's very treatable. It grows very slow and all that, which is great news. But it's still cancer and it's still trying to kill you. And then so I initially thought that what was going on, and so my wife and I had a plan, and we met with our physicians, and we were very happy with what was going on. And after my surgery to have the prostate removed, of course, they sent it away to a lab and all that kind of stuff. And here we found out after the fact that it had already metastasized. So it's already spread. So they found spots in my bones. They found a few spots in my liver. And now we've got to watch that. And that meant going from kind of a relatively easy treatment procedure to a multiple 2+ year treatment interactions. I am just completing year 1 of that. So I've got another year of treatment and things that I'm going through. And one of the things that helped me get unstuck, obviously you go through all kinds of things in your mind, and your brain just tells you all kinds of stuff. And you really have to learn to take your thoughts captive, so to speak, and really not allow some of those things through. And one of the things that really helped me was during my radiation. So I went through, some of the treatments and all that, and the surgery and all that. And again, when they found that it had spread, we had decided, well, I'm going to need a pretty aggressive course of radiation. And radiate, which is every day for 40 days. And they just send these, I don't even remember, photon rays and all this radiation rays and stuff directly. It can pinpoint. The tech is amazing these days, so they can, with pinpoint accuracy, find the exact spot. So I'm doing body scans, bone scans, PET scans, all these scans to find the exact millimeter of where these cancer spots are. And so you've got to be very aggressive with those. So they zap it with a high dose of radiation. And so I had to cancel everything for 40 days. And part of my livelihood is keynote speaking and events and things like that. And so I had to cancel these events. And that was, so I've got the trouble of that. And then I've got the loss of the income and all those kinds of things. So it's compounding on me. And, but you got to do it. I mean, you don't really have a choice.
Yeah.
So you've got to do it. And so what I did is I told my wife, I said, I've got to keep myself mentally engaged here. I can't check out. I can't feel sorry for myself. I can't just go to these treatments every day and then come home and lay around. I've got to stay intellectually stimulated. And so I made a commitment to myself that for every day of radiation, every one of those 40 days, I would write 1,000 words every day. And the initial intent was for me to just kind of keep a journal, right? It was just a catharsis kind of a thing, to think about what I'm thinking, my feelings, my emotions, things like that. And I ended up after day 3 of that, I stumbled across something that I had written on years before, just kind of in a very informal, like blog kind of a thing, on my concept of what it meant to be epic and to live an epic life. And for me, epic is a mnemonic device that I use to represent 4 aspects of an epic person. And that is be excellent, be perceptive, be inspired, and be compassionate. So EPIC, and that's the epic thing. And so I stumbled across that, and I started just blogging about it, doing this journal, and I realized it tugged on my heart. And so what I did for the next 37 days was write about what I thought it meant to become epic and live an epic life. And when I was finished, I told my wife, I said, I think I've written the book that I've always wanted to write. And so I, pitched it out to some publishers and different things. And sure enough, one of them was like, dude, this is amazing. Let's do it. So I wrote the book. We've been refining and editing, and it's actually launching in August. So next month, in a few weeks, it's going to be launching. And the title of the book is Becoming Epic. And how excellence, perception, inspiration, and compassion are antidotes for mediocrity is that. So it's for anybody it's not my personal cancer story per se, although I do share things in the book about my own journey, but it's really just about developing those four aspects of your life in any area that you're in. And that really was a lot of inspiration and hope for me. And during that whole process, my wife and I launched a foundation called Battle for the Bulge, kind of a little tongue-in-cheek thing that we thought was funny, and I guess other people did too. We have the Battle for the Bulge Foundation, which is a prostate cancer education and awareness endeavor. So we've raised money for cancer research. We do 5Ks to raise money every year, one big family fun day walk, 5K kind of a thing. We raise money for that. I wrote another book at the same time, believe it or not, called Diagnosed, which is my cancer story, how to overcome adversity. Is really what that's about. And that's more of a detailed look into my cancer story. Both books are actually coming out in August. So, yeah, so that's what I did to get unstuck.
Yeah, I love it. I absolutely love it. And I want to go back into Epic here in a minute, but I want to go this is interesting because how long have you been a leadership coach for? How long have you been doing keynote speaking for? How long has this been your career?
20 years.
Okay. So you spent a lot of time developing others, developing yourself. What initially got you into the profession that you're doing? What encouraged you or inspired you to go in that direction?
Great question. So one, I've always been an enormous fan of leadership and just always intrigued and inspired by what leaders do. And my PhD is in global leadership, and my particular area of research focuses on the differences between what a manager does to get things done versus what a leader does to get things done. And now, to represent, to the integrity of the profession, all that, there is a lot of overlap between management and leadership. And there are a lot of managers who do things that are leadership-esque. Yes. But there's something unique. There's a different way of thinking. There's a different philosophy that leaders use to get people to do the things that they might not want to do or to be inspired about that. So that's what I study. That's where contextual intelligence even emerged from. So when I was doing my dissertation, I was interested in what are the leadership behaviors that separate someone, from just a managerial type of activities. And one of the things that I was able to identify and put a name to and create a construct around was this idea of contextual intelligence. And leaders actually see time differently. And that's where the 3D thinking framework comes from. Managers tend to be hindsight and insight focused only. They have very, very low foresight. Leaders, on the other hand, have a very, very high foresight capacity and ability and a little bit lower insight, and they have decent hindsight. And so that was interesting to me to look at those two dynamics. And so that's what emerged. And actually, it's also a great story, is I never really intended to get into the public speaking space like I am now. I love it. But I was just a college professor. And so my first thing after I did this, I wrote this article on contextual intelligence, just a regular academic journal article piece, right? That nobody reads. Who reads academic journals? And so I wrote this academic journal article and had it published, and I'm sitting in my office, and about 2 years, maybe even 3 years after that article was published, I get a phone call out of the blue from ended up being a Fortune 50 organization who found this article. And that's a whole great story in and of itself, how they even found it. But anyways, he read the article and he's like, Dr. Kutz, this is the best thing I've ever read on leadership. And I've read everything. Our leadership university is the number one in the world. Disney, in fact, sends their people to us for leadership training and stuff like that. And so this was a huge global behemoth. And that's my first client I ever had. They're like, you got to come here and talk to us about this and all that. So I started the whole thing with this huge company, my very first client. And then they told me, once people find out that you're working with us, they're going to come knocking. So develop a website, protect this intellectual property. They did. I would have been totally screwed. And one of those guys who just, I didn't know what happened to me, but they were very ethical. They were very considerate, told me what I needed to do and said, and then just, hold your seatbelt because everybody does what we do. And they weren't wrong. I mean, my first 3 clients were Fortune 500 companies, and all of a sudden I'm traveling all over the world, speaking here, speaking there. They asked for a book. I didn't even have a book at the time, so I hurried up and put together a pretty crappy first draft, though. I called it a white paper. I didn't even call it a book, a white paper on contextual intelligence that eventually evolved into Leadership Book of the Year for Innovation and Cutting Edge Perspective back in 2013. That was. So it's been quite a journey for me. In fact, we just released the 2nd edition of Contextual Intelligence, I want to say 4 weeks ago. So it's been a very active summer for me.
Wow. Well, congratulations. That's amazing. And, I went back. I wanted to go back in time real quick. I wanted to get all that context because leading into you, I think, life prepares us for things. And sometimes we're not prepared for the things that happen, but we have a choice to be prepared for what's coming up. And we never know what's coming necessarily because surprises are surprises for a reason. And I'm thinking the prostate cancer leading you into that situation. Like, I'm sure you've had years of yourself, growing yourself, developing yourself along with others to prepare you for such a powerful event as what is going on right now in your life. So we're going to take a break real quick for 60 seconds to shout out the sponsor of the show. When I come back, I want to dive into how those years of preparation unknowingly prepared you for what's going on right now in your life and how people can prepare themselves for the unknown. Like we talked about, I mentioned at the beginning, we live in a life of unknown. Change is the only guarantee. So how are you prepared and how can others prepare for big things, invited and uninvited? We'll talk about that in 1 minute. Are you struggling to make consistent, valuable content for yourself? Do you want to have an efficient and effective way to create content that attracts the people that you want to connect with in life, the people you want to build relationships with in business? Do you want to be the go-to authority at what you do, at what you're great at? Would it be helpful for you if you had a platform that connects you to incredible people in your industry? The kind of platform that gets you leads and lands you clients without you having to beat down anybody's door or blow up anybody's inbox. Whether you're already creating content or you're desiring to start and it's something that's been kind of burning inside of you for a while, I urge you and encourage you to check out the Pro Podcaster Academy. Get started right now. Join the waitlist at robzwentz.com.
Hi, my name is Jose Escobar, and I'm the founder and CEO of the Connected Leaders Academy. We're a growing tribe, a community of entrepreneurs all over the world globally. If you're an entrepreneur and you're looking to grow personally and professionally, scale your influence, develop your skill sets, move the needle in your business, more clients, more money, more profit, the bottom line, and of course, grow your circle and your network like never before, join the Connected Leaders Academy today. Check me out on Instagram and on Facebook, the @ JASCO25. We look forward to having you join us. Take care.
So, Matt, let's talk about that. I love this conversation, by the way. Really, really powerful. So important. How did those years of leadership training prepare you for what you stepped into in 2023?
Yeah. So, the whole idea of the unknown and even my own diagnosis, came out of the blue. I'm normally, I am healthy other than the cancer in my body, I suppose. But so my background is sports medicine. Actually, my master's degree is exercise physiology and strength and all that. Leadership. I teach sports medicine. And so I've always worked with great athletes, elite athletes. I've been super blessed to travel with Team USA, track and field, and international events and different things, and been just an amazing career in the sports medicine side of things. And so I always had that mindset, right, of self-improvement, being better emotionally, physically, spiritually, all those things. And I didn't even know about my cancer. I had no symptoms. Most people who have prostate cancer, especially as advanced as mine was, they have all the trouble you get with prostate cancer: frequent urination, getting up all night, unable to empty your bladder, erectile dysfunction, all that kind of stuff. I didn't have any of those symptoms at all. So when we found out I mean, my doctors were shocked. I was shocked because I actually was training for a triathlon, crashed my bike, and broke my hand. And so I was just rehabbing that and doing a follow-up visit for my orthopedic with my hand. And my doctor happened to look at my chart, who was a family friend. He's been my doctor for years and a sports medicine doc. And he's like, "Hey, Matt, you never came in for your 50-year-old, colonoscopy, all the stuff that every guy loves to talk about. You never came in for your 50-year-old checkup. We need to do that, get the blood work, get all that kind of stuff." And I'm like, okay, whatever. Because I had no fear whatsoever because I'm running triathlons and all this kind of things and feeling good and not having any symptoms. And anyway, long story short, they took a blood draw and they did a PSA screen, which is prostate specific antigen test, which is how they discover prostate cancer. And my PSA number was astronomically high. Not just a high PSA is 3 or 4. Mine was 54. So it was off the charts. And so all of a sudden I went from literally one day being a triathlete and relatively, other than the, eat less salt kind of a thing that your doctor always tells you and that kind of stuff, to being now a cancer patient overnight. And my wife and I have a very deep faith, and part of our faith, we're like, okay, wait a second here. What's going on? And we likened it to the David and Goliath story that you read about in 1 Samuel chapter 17, where, and everybody's familiar. I'm sure your listeners are familiar with the David and Goliath story. Malcolm Gladwell actually wrote a book on it several years ago. And part of the opening introduction to Epic is, how has life prepared me for this giant? Here I'm in this giant. So I went back and actually started reading the story more closely. And I realized that when David faced his giant, he was able to have the faith or the capacity to withstand his giant because of all the preparation he had done before. And he called them, the lions and the bears. And David was a shepherd, and he had many times, by his own admission, had to fight lions and bears. And I thought in my life, I thought back, okay, what are the lions and bears that we have fought? And my wife and I sat down and we actually took like 4 or 5 legal pages of notes of our 31 years of marriage at this point, looking back over all the lions and bears. And what's interesting, when you're fighting a lion or a bear, you think it's the giant, right? You think it's the biggest thing you've ever faced. Yeah. And this thing's going to kill you if you don't defeat it. So we went back and we looked through our life of all the different times where we ran into a major obstacle and came out victorious, or we came out, maybe not unscathed, but made it through, and successfully, and, this kind of thing. And so we came up with this list, and we sat down when we were done. It took us several days to do this. It's not like we just sat down in a moment, and did this. We sat down and we realized the fight of our life we're facing right now, this cancer that's already starting to spread in my body, and the prognosis wasn't good at the time. I mean, the research shows that the people who have the type of cancer that I am diagnosed with only make it about 5 years. And so I've got at least 30 years ahead of me that I'm planning on, all kind of a thing. So that's not going to work. So we sat down and began to look at all these other things. It's like, okay, we're facing this giant, but we're going to be able to beat this giant because of all the other little lions and bears across our time. So I think the first step in preparation is actually acknowledging and knowing that you've been prepared. You have to look back, and a lot of times that's where the 3D thinking really comes in, because so many of us fall victim to what is known as hindsight bias. Hindsight bias is misremembering the past in your favor. And so what we did is we made sure we checked for hindsight bias and didn't over glorify this little, event that happened, but really look back and say, what did we learn through this pain point? What did we learn through this pain point? What did we learn through this pain point? Look how we were delivered here. Look how we got through this. Look, remember when we went through this and we made it through. Remember when we thought this was the end, but it wasn't. Remember when we thought this was the end, but it wasn't. And we went through and we looked back over the course of, again, our 30-year marriage, and we're like, we got a pretty long list of times where we thought this was the end and it wasn't. And so that gave us the faith and the mental capacity to be able to look at this and say, you're going to be just like those other things. And that's what David did. David's facing Goliath, and he actually said, if you read the story in 1 Samuel 17, he actually said, you're going to be just like the lions and the bears, and just like the Lord gave me them, he's going to give me you, and I'm going to feed. He actually said, I'm going to feed your head to the wild beasts, kind of thing. And so my wife and I took that. This is our David moment, our David and Goliath moment. So just like all these other things, this cancer is going to be just like that. And that's the attitude we have to have.
Yeah.
And so the preparation was huge. And had I not spent my life as a student, and a student of leadership, a student of high performers and things like that, and the mindset that it takes, the 3D thinking, we really had to, I practiced what I preached, so to speak, and turned this. Okay, I've been preaching about fantasy versus foresight for a long time now. And since 2013 or before 2013, 2008 is probably when that whole thing started happening. So I'm like, well, now I got to put my money where my mouth is and not just fantasize about the future, but here's what I want to happen, and here's how I'm going to get there. So I rehearsed those things with my wife, and those years of preparation of being familiar with the concept, having done it with smaller things, I think have been absolutely critical. And again, you're preparing for, you alluded to it before the break, we're preparing for the unknown. And one of the things that I do is teach people how to prepare for the unknown. I mean, what do you do when you don't know what you're preparing for, but and so what I tell them is, listen, this much I know from history, from life, from antiquity, that something is going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And now the question is, how blind are you going to be to it? When my sons were little, I remember, teaching them, they were athletes in high school and had really successful athletes and that kind of thing. And so they were popular. Okay. So I say that to say this. So as popular kids in high school, they're going to be invited to a bunch of parties and different things like that. And so my wife and I were very intentional about them making good choices that don't come to haunt them later on. So I told them when they were 12 or 13 years old, I begin to tell them, because you see this, you use your foresight and you see this coming. And I said, boy, I have two boys. And I said, boys, I promise you something is going to happen in the terms of when you're at a party, you're going to be offered alcohol at an underage drinking opportunity. You're going to be offered pornography, and things like that. And I'm telling you, it's going to happen. You can believe me or not, but I promise you it is. And you need to make your choice now for when that happens. And the reason why other kids fall victim to these things is because when it is presented, they're surprised. It was an unknown. They weren't ready for it. And then they just make the choice in the moment. And they fall, many of them fall to peer pressure and so like this, and they make unwise choices that haunt them for the rest of their lives. And I told my boys it's going to happen. And I remember the first time each of them came home from whatever party they were at, and they were like, "Oh my God, Dad, you were right. Had I not made my choice already." And so I think that's a big part of preparation. And even though you don't know what it is going to be down the road, you'd be foolish to think that everything's going to continue the way it is. Things will change. Something will happen. So you have to make your choice now. How am I going to respond to adversity when it does happen? Mm-hmm. When it does happen, you're not taken aback by it. You're not surprised by it. You don't lose your cognitive control, because that's what happens. The first thing a big unknown event does sweeps you off your feet, and you get disoriented, and you start making choices and decisions in a disoriented condition, which is not a good thing to do. So one of the things you can do to prevent that is to prepare in advance for a disorienting thing. and then make your choice of what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to remain faithful. I'm going to remain steadfast. And these are the things that you can decide now for when those things come. And then when they do, those are the things that you can get through. And that's what my wife and I did. The lion and bears, we call it the lion and bears list. You can start the lion and bears list now. What are the things that you thought were the end of you? Or, financial relationships, whatever it is that you didn't think you were going to make it through, that you did. Mm-hmm. And I look back and I remember I thought that was going to kill me, but it didn't. I thought that was going to, bankrupt us, but it didn't. I thought that was going to put us here, but it didn't. Look at us now, and have that list. And then when the big thing does come, you can say, wait a second, just like those other things, this is going to be the exact same.
I love that. I'm so glad I asked that question, because that was such a great answer. And I'm always taking notes during episodes, and I'm always looking for themes, right? And that is such a good theme. What are your lions and bears? Because they're preparing you for the bigger one that's coming, for the Goliath that's coming. And that's so true, man. Reflect on how you've been prepared. And, there's so much benefit to reflecting on that, to see, like you said, oh, I thought it was over here. I never knew how we were going to get past this thing, right? And some of those things last for years. Some of those places, it could be a year, it could be 5, 10 years, right? Those periods can last for a long time, but they're preparing you. And what other reason would there be to go through something difficult like that, but to prepare you, number one, for the future, and also to help other people prepare and to help other people get through difficult things.
Absolutely.
And God says he never tempts us, but he does test us. And those tests are so vital. And so we live in a society now that we want to nerf everything. We want to kind of coddle everything. And there's nothing wrong with taking care of somebody or protecting somebody or even yourself, but understanding the value of the resiliency, the patience, and the fortitude to get through really difficult things. There's so much value in it. There's so much growth in that place. And I absolutely love that, man. That was so powerful, just the way you were explaining that. And I have this written down right now. I'm going to go back. I'm going to reflect on how I've been prepared for what I'm going through right now, but also what am I going through right now that's preparing me for the future, because the change is guaranteed. It's the only guarantee. Things are going to change, and inevitably something's going to happen, and I want to be aware of it, right? Because you could be, that's interesting too. You could have gone through really difficult things, but you might not be aware of how resilient you are, of those lions and bears that you've conquered. So when the big thing happens, you're shocked by it, even though because you might be prepared, but not be aware of how prepared you are. So keeping yourself aware that you're ready.
That's huge. Yeah, that's huge. And one of the things that I talk about in Becoming Epic, to kind of jump to the C, the compassion part, I'm
glad you're doing it. That's where I wanted to go. I wanted to go to compassion. So yeah, go there.
Yeah. So the thing that's interesting about the whole concept of compassion is we generally think it means being nice to other people, feeling sorry for other people, or being generous to other people when they're going through something difficult. And of course, it does include that. But if you're really honest about what it means, it actually is more of a personal thing for you. And if you break the word down, compassion. And com is just the Latin for with. It's a prefix for with or alongside of. And then passion, the Latin I think is passio. Don't quote me on that. But that's what I think it is the Latin for that. And it means pain and suffering. And see, we have a false sense in our society and culture in the United States. And I know this from having lived in Africa. I've lived in Australia. Did a lot of work in Peru and things like that. That we're one of the only nations that thinks of passion as a good thing. You got to have passion for what you do. And if you really look at the nature of passion, think of the common phrase we all say around Easter time, the passion of the Christ.
Yeah.
The passion of the Christ was his crucifixion, his pain and suffering. And passion is really about something that causes you pain and suffering, something you're willing to suffer for. We've evolved it in our culture to something you're willing to suffer for. And we think, oh, my passion is leadership, or my passion is relationships, or my passion is developing people. What you're saying is that's something you love so much that you're willing to go through grief, pain, and suffering to get to.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think about it that way, people are like, well, wait a second, maybe I'm not that passionate about it because I just want to do something that I love. And we
Yeah.
think of passion as doing something that you love.
Now, could that be flipped around too, to where passion is because you've gone through much pain and suffering in a certain area, you build a passion for it, right? You
Yeah,
would build passion because of the trials you went through in that area.
right. But I don't think many people get to that point because I think many people settle for mediocrity. And that's the subtitle of the book. They realize, oh, what I want, I'm not willing to suffer for.
Yeah.
So they just settle for mediocrity. This is good enough, the middle of the road. I'm not as bad as everybody else, but I'm not as good as I could be. And they settle for it. Well, at least I'm not the bottom of the ladder. And because of that's mediocrity, and people get frustrated. They question their life, they question their life choices, and they lead lives that aren't very fulfilling and satisfying because the first time they come up against significant opposition or that pain and suffering, prefer they want to go. They're like, well, maybe I'm not supposed to go there because everything's supposed to be easy. Right. And that's just not the truth. So to be compassionate is really about embracing the hard thing, embracing the painful thing that life brings you. It's, again, going through those lions and bears moments and recognizing these are for my betterment. These are supposed to make me stronger. And then you're right. When you go through it, then you truly have a passion when you come out the other side. One of the things I said in my Contextual Intelligence book that gets a decent amount of press, and if I ever have a famous quote, it's chaos is the package that your potential arrives in. And so this is something that I believed and learned a long time ago. And it ties directly to this notion of compassion. You've got to receive the pain and suffering that comes to you as a learning opportunity and an opportunity to improve yourself. And when you come through that, then you have truly demonstrated personal compassion. And now you have an insight that other people don't have. And now you can offer value to someone that they might not be able to see or have on their own. And that's where compassion, the way we understand it today, comes into play. I see what you've been through. I felt what you've gone through. I can help you because I've also carried my own cross, so to speak. And now I have value to add to you. And so that's a really important aspect of compassion that we tend not to understand well.
Wow, man, that's really insightful. Thank you for that. And what did you say the quote is that you'd like to live by? Can you say that again?
Yeah. Chaos is the package that your potential arrives in.
That your potential arrives in. Right. Because chaos, chaos does not feel good. Bringing order to the chaos is what you need to do. You got to bring order to it. And to bring order to it, there's going to be a lot of pain. There's going to be a lot of pain because there's a lot of potential there. The chaos shows there's potential, but it's not put in order yet. And you've got to put that in order. And that depending on your resources, your circumstances, and your drive, right? You can do it in a short amount of time or a long time to put that chaos together, depending on the situation. It could be tons of varieties of different things. But the point is, it seems like if you're given chaos, because we're all given chaos in some area of our life, we need to put it together to go where we're supposed to go, to get where we're supposed to go. At least that makes sense to me.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. And this is how I live my life. When I find myself or think that I'm in a chaotic situation, then and I've trained myself to do this, my immediate response is no longer, which is the normal response, by the way, avoid chaos, get away from chaos. My idea now is when chaos presents itself, I ask myself, okay, what is it that I need to do differently that I wouldn't have before this chaos happened? And chaos is always an opportunity for me to innovate and create. And I think that's how we get out of chaos. Chaos can only be solved through innovation and creativity. You have to do something you've never done before, because chaos is an indication that what you're trying isn't working.
Yeah.
And so when we find ourselves in a chaotic situation, I always tell people, and I tell myself especially, is okay, I need to change something about what I'm doing, either the way I'm thinking, the way I'm perceiving, how I'm intervening here, and I need to do something original. And that then ties to the third part of the epic model of how to stay inspired. And because somebody who's truly epic has to learn to be inspired and to nurture inspiration in the midst of pain, suffering, turbulence, the unknown, the uncertain, the volatility, the VUCA world, the volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous life that we're all in. The real trick is not just getting through it, but maintaining and creating inspiration in those moments. And that's really, I think, a key to being or becoming an epic person.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so good. Wow. Powerful stuff, Matt. Thank you. That was amazing. We got to wrap this episode up, but I could talk to you for another 12 hours. So, but we don't have that time. That's so good. Such good stuff. I want to encourage people who are watching or listening to go to your website, MatthewKutz.com or Kutz. I said Kutz at the beginning. Kutztown.
No
What's
worry.
in my head. Matthew Kutz. I've been trying to get it right. So MatthewKutz.com. What would you like people to do when they go to the website?
So, just check out my stuff. I've got some free resources there. My contact information is there. One of the things that I'm proud of is I'm not one of those people who won't respond to people when they email me or reach out. I love talking about this stuff. I've dedicated my life toward it. So if you reach out to me and want to talk more, have a question, of course, buy my books. I mean, that's the big one. Please, you'll see there, we've got several books there. My wife and I have actually written a book on marriage and how to have a fruitful and productive marriage. So we've got marriage resources on there. We've got leadership resources on there. We've got becoming epic, contextual intelligence, all that stuff is there. So
incredible. Check out the website. I want to thank you for your time here today. Anything you want to leave the audience with before we sign off?
Yeah. Keep working to become epic. And I really want to encourage you that the things that you think were meant to kill you, destroy you, derail you, discourage you, were meant to make you stronger. And I believe that. It's not a cliche. It's not something I say just, because it's a positive message. I actually believe that. And I believe it for you as well.
Yeah. Very true. I believe it too. Another incredible testimony of breakthrough on the show. Until next time, this has been the Unstuck Movement. All right.